Okay, I'm so sorry. The lighting's so bad here. I've been trying to maneuver it, and I got a big light bulb right here. It's the best I can do. Okay, so I wanted to do part two. Okay, we talked about part one about coping and surviving bullying, whether it be at school, at home, at work. Okay, the hard step for me has been is just saying something and the reassurance that I'm not the cause of why someone does that. And a lot of times initially, we all somehow arrived to this point that somehow we did something to earn it. And I know realistically, if you look at the bigger picture, you're not the reason why. But if you've been through it over and over again, it makes sense. Why in the world did this keep happening? It's not to say that there isn't a flaw or two within ourselves, but why does it keep happening? Why is there case after case of it happening to the same person? I want to talk to you guys about TI and targeted individuals. You know you're a targeted individual when you know it's happened and there's a pattern of it. There's either something going on in your life that either attracts it or draws it. Some people call it the laws of attraction. I don't believe that. I believe some people are initially just dealing with it until they come to the realization. It starts with yourself. I'm sorry again about the lighting. I'm doing the best I can here. So targeted individuals will commonly look at the traits or maybe the type of people they deal with. But I'll tell you, nothing you did brought on this behavior or brought on these circumstances. Okay, there are factors though. If you've been poor, welfare, but that should never justify abuse. That should never justify being the target of bullying, target of problems at home. But see, I think you have to keep in mind, don't underestimate a predator. They know exactly the kind of people they're looking for, they're preying on. That's why they call them predators to begin with. Don't ever give these people too much credit though. They are smart. They know what they're looking for in a person. They're looking for that vulnerable trait, okay? If you've been a victim of rejection and you've been blaming yourself, you're really pointing the fingers at the wrong people. The blame goes where it belongs, okay? I often hear, well, we heard this before. Well, you might hear it a couple more times, okay? That's the pattern in which most people, once they realize, like, listen, until you recognize that this is your reality. I mean, the hard part is accepting that this has happened to you, okay? I think that's probably the hardest thing I came to realize, that this is a pattern in my life, and it wasn't until I went to what they call Gershol therapy that I recognized that this is a pattern I need to break. How do I do that? Well, they call grounding effect and things like that. And I listed this before, okay? You look at some people and they've told me, like, you don't look like a victim. There's no such thing as what a victim looks like. You don't wear this title or banner. It just happens, okay? And I was really surprised how many people thought, well, how did you end up in this situation? I go, there was a couple of things that had happened that laid the groundwork for years of abuse. Right? You know how I know that? Because slowly and gradually, just like a friend of mine had mentioned, after a while, if you plant the seeds long enough, the ground is saturated enough, and it lays that, what we called earlier, laying the groundwork. So I look at all these things as it lays the groundwork. Okay, there are factors. They said poor single women are commonly victims of domestic violence. That is a fact. Then there are other factors. What's the relationship with the family history? They put that into consideration. So why are we outspoken? Because the only way to break the pattern of abuse in your life, whether it be domestic violence, bullying, on and on, is to recognize there's been patterns in your life. And that's why I want you guys to understand why Gershol therapy is to recognize patterns. Okay, so somebody suffering from PTSD. I'm going to just give you a quick study here on EMDR. For trauma victims, there might be blackouts, things like that. They call it PTSD. There's other clinical names for it. But somebody who blacks out, like I didn't have my first experience with blacking out till like less than a year ago. I've had trauma, I've had abuse, I've had all that. And I didn't really think of it as trauma until it happened to me. I actually experienced a real blackout at work. And there was something that probably set that person off. I have no idea, okay? But whatever allowed that groundwork, there was other things that were going on. I just came out of surgery. I was really fragile at the time. I had no idea that this was going to keep playing out in my life. But like I said, it goes back to Gershol therapy. So, you know, recovery and therapy is huge, okay? I emphasize it. That's why we do peer support, okay? And I do that because I want to be open enough with all of you that I can be vulnerable. Because I know a lot of people don't watch these videos enough to refer to it, but I want you to use this as a referral. If you've been a victim or survivor of domestic violence, child abuse, any of those things, you know, you'll know that there's patterns in your life that are very similar. They call them familiar things that happen. It's like some people call it deja vu, but it's just very familiar. I want to go into the spiritual component about this because I know people who look at the spiritual component, because I definitely believe this is where recovery is of the heart, mind, and soul, okay? You make the therapeutic connection when you look in terms of counseling, recovery, okay? Some people look to religious counseling or they look to spiritual counseling. To me, I think they're very different from each other. Some people look to other therapeutic methods, exercise. I turn to that kind of stuff. But I also look at the other things that people have to take in consideration. You have to live your life. You don't want to dredge this stuff up, but if it keeps playing out in your life, then it's time to face it, okay? I often heard it's like, we don't want to hear about the past. No, this is not about the past. The past is still playing itself out. That's why we talk about the issues that belong in the present, okay? If you have a history of abuse in your life, or if you have a history, it presents itself in, you know, different situations. It could be at work, it could be at home, it could be aggressive behavior, all these things, and these learn over time after you're in that place of recovery, which that's where some of us are at, okay? I look at this as like day one. If you're recovering, you're going to recognize right away that you needed counseling a long time ago. You didn't just go through this to survive, not to live, okay? The whole point is learning to live again, learning to be employable. A lot of people who've been through this, they haven't worked in a while, and that's why I want to talk about other methods of recovery and why we do what we do, because I know that most of us need to get back to work and live our lives. That's as quick as possible. But you have to allow yourself recovery time. I want to tell you guys something very important about domestic violence. And so I've learned this over being a volunteer, okay? Usually after somebody's been through a horrific ordeal, it takes 3 months that your memories come back, meaning that your trauma, okay, when you experience something traumatic, and this could be a number of situations. I don't just look at abuse alone, okay? But if you've been traumatized, the things that you remember go to the back of your brain, okay? Back here. It's stored there. It takes 3 months, approximately, for you to start remembering things. Actually, if you hear more about car accident survivors, their days become nights, their nights become day. It's incredible. The science behind what has happened to somebody through trauma and how they recover. And there's no exact science, but I have to tell you, the stats are amazing, okay? So when we think about somebody that's been trauma, the frontal lobe, where, you know, you process and articulate things, you store that stuff in the back by the time you process, but that's all been blacked out. That's what we mean blacking out, is that your brain can't process it. That's why I look at this abuse as a form of brain trauma, okay? A lot of times people don't even recognize it. They don't look at abuse survivors as brain trauma victims, but that's typically what happens, okay? So let's get off the topic of abuse. Let's talk about just trauma, because trauma could come in all kinds of forms, because we're not specific to that, but that's been the area we've covered a lot of ground, because I think it's so significant. There are people that are completely functional. They haven't survived or been through enough in their life to really make that they haven't qualified, but they may have experienced things, okay? Let's talk about severe significant trauma, which is associated with like combat victims or somebody who's been in a car wreck, or maybe something so bad, maybe it was a violent crime. Again, that same thing is played out. Wait, hold on. Fix that again. It's the same thing, okay? That's why I think there's incredible things that you can gain from learning from one another. That's why peer support is so great. I look at peer support as people that are healthy enough to participate in group. I do recommend people go to individual counseling before going into group, okay? Because you have to understand there are going to be things that are being brought up in group that are not going to be brought up in individual counseling, okay? And plus, this gives you time where the therapist or counselor can work with you on an individual level and build that rapport. And then gradually integrate that, okay? Okay, so let me leave it there. I want to tell you why we do Erica's House, okay? Because I am a true believer that recovery is, you need recovery immediately. You don't want to stay around abuse too long, okay? Surviving is one thing, living is another, okay? And the only way you recover from the past is you make a decision. This is a daily thing. Today is a new step in the new direction. You can't, it's too easy to blame the things that happened in the past. It's obvious that these are things that are reoccurring problems, but it's time to cut out those people in your life. Not because you don't like them, because you're not good for them and they're not good for you, okay? If they're not involved in your recovery, they don't need to be involved, period. You have to sometimes cut it out completely. I'm sorry that there are a lot of people who have been desperate for this kind of help, but this support without people reaching out to one another or turning to somebody that they can talk to, I don't know where you get this kind of help anymore. In fact, if you go to a therapy place and a counseling, that's good, but outside of that, what do you do when you're having a nightmare or a sleep paralysis or you've been an abuse survivor? Why aren't there people paying more attention to it? I don't know. Because maybe they're caught up in the news story and not the real stuff that's really going on. And maybe they don't know. Maybe they're not paying attention. I will tell you, I am not a big fan of all these pharmacology methods, okay? I look at it this way. The more informed you are, the more aware, the more self-defense mechanisms that you are trained to do, you're not going to be a victim over and over again. You're going to recognize, I can't live like this anymore. Why is it that people emphasize so much on these reports? Because I think some people, that's where they're comfortable at. They're not comfortable to touch the topic on how victims and survivors survive. Maybe they're not educated. Maybe they're not committed. I don't know. Maybe they are committed, but they're only committed to a degree. I have no idea. But we're committed. We've been here for a long time. I mean, I know Erica personally. I don't know if any of you might know who she is here in our area, but, you know, when she passed away, we knew we had to step it up, you know. She was our life, you know, our lifeline, the connection to the world. If you've come out of a bad situation, you know what it's like to, you know, kind of latch on to somebody, you know what I mean? And she was just like a mom to so many of us kids. And she came out literally to the streets and grabbed kids off the street. She was a hero. I can only hope that we're just as much like her, and if not more. And I know, you know, we deal with the kids that are on the street, left out there. I'm surprised how many people refer to these kids as prostitutes. I've dealt with kids that are 11 years old, and they were thrown out in the street to prostitute. I mean, I'm surprised they call them prostitutes. They're kids. These are kids, and they make money. They profit off these kids. So to call these kids prostitutes, I've met them. Now, a lot of them are grown up and have survived, you know what I mean? But they're not fully, they put that stuff behind them, believe me, okay? But their kids are thrown out in the street and they are hustling for whoever it is, okay? But going on in the street, it's nothing for us to work the graveyard shift and look around and see if there's kids walking the streets. It's nothing. It's been going on for years. In fact, we've been doing it for 30-some years. I really wish there was more programs like the one in Los Angeles. I hope we can create that here. Outreach for kids that never ever have to return to the streets. I've talked to the representatives in the state, but in Los Angeles, they have a place where kids do get rescued off the streets and they don't go back to the streets. So hopefully that's where we're headed with it, because we got to rescue the kids off the street. And no, foster care is not always the answer for some of these kids. Sometimes the abuse is happening in the system. So there's a lot of reasons why we look at these programs like the one in Los Angeles, where they reach out to the kids and they pull the kids off the street. Okay, you know, and I know that this is the way it is. I said to myself a long time ago, I don't know at what capacity we're working, but we're just going to let God lead us wherever we need to go. Because when we reach out to those victims, we're helping ourselves. That's the whole component to this. And that's why we call it Erica's House. I really, really hope we can get more recognition and more time with you guys about why we want to reach out to these kids. Because like I said earlier, if we don't reach out to them, who will? Honestly. And there's families that are desperate for answers. There's people in communities that are desperate for answers. They want to know why these kids are hustling. And you know what? As we educate ourselves about trauma and abuse and just the survivor issues, you understand that those survivor issues, those coping mechanisms only last for so long. You have to outgrow it. That's your body saying it's time to heal, okay? And putting this behind you. I'm going to talk to you, that young girl or young boy, you've been molested. Okay, I know some of you personally. I know you think that some of us have walked away from you. Oh no, we're just repositioning. I just want you to know that. We haven't left your side. I think about you every day. I pray for you. I know you've had hardship. It breaks my heart every day that I can't talk to you or reach out to you. But I hope if you get this message, I want you to know what I think of you personally. You are my hero. You're the bravest, most courageous young people I've ever met. I am so proud of you. I want you to know there are things I wish I could put words to it when I see you laughing and joking, and you're like the life of the party. You make such a difference in so many people's lives. I don't even think you really recognize how many people are so proud of you. And I know if I could, I'd be up there celebrating those good memories. But we're hard at work here. And hopefully you know where to find us, and that information I'll put below. You'll know how to get a hold of me, okay? We are not leaving you guys out there. I know some of you have been through a lot. You've been child pornography victims. I know, and we've talked, and I love you guys so much. I'm so proud of you. I know I don't say it enough, but I want you to know we're here for you, okay? And this is what keeps us going, okay? We know you're out there. You're making a difference. You've changed my life. I always knew you were out there. I'm so happy that, you know, because of who you are. And I told you I would adopt you myself, and I promise you. I mean, we're going to be filling up some rooms if I end up adopting them, because I won't stop at like just a couple. I'll probably adopt 30, 40. And no, I'm not Mother Teresa, but hey, you know what I mean? I mean, some of you just have changed our lives so much. And I know that there have been moments where we've laughed and joked and told stories, but I have to tell you, some of the heartache that came with this, I know someday it's going to all pay dividends, you know what I mean? And someday you're going to be running and facilitating these groups. I know that, and I believe that. That's why it keeps us going, because we're not going to just stop at 1 or 2 victims, and we're not going to stop volunteering. We're not going to stop fighting back and talking to the state representatives and representing kids out there and survivors and abuse victims. We're not going to stop, okay? We've been at this since 1985, okay? It's the way it is. So we're not going anywhere. Sorry. For those people that have a problem with that, too bad. Because you know what? The one thing I have learned is that we're committed. And just as much as we're committed, so are the abusers. And they're not stupid. Okay? So I want to send you a message to that creep out there that is preying on these kids. You know what you're doing. The best thing you can do is stop and think about what you're doing. Maybe that's the whole point, that you can't stop. Okay? I personally don't know what brought you to this point, okay? I don't hate you, but I want you to think about the lives you're changing. You're affecting lives in a very serious way. Please reconsider and turn away from this lifestyle and the choices you're making, because I'm telling you, it costs the state, it costs families, it costs lives. I mean, if you think about the suicide rate, it's incredible. Abuse survivors, what you endure, okay? So that for that predator out there, if you could think twice, please. You're saving yourself. You're saving yourself a life of prison time too, because they're coming down and they're cracking down. And I promise you guys, it costs money to recover. It costs money to do outreach. This is no cheap endeavor, okay? I'm sorry if there's people, I hate to break it to you, but nothing happens for free. In fact, we know that's the whole reason these kids are out in the street. Somebody's going to profit, okay? If we're going to ever make a profit, it's because we know we got to put these people back to work and live lives again. And they don't have to be a statistic, and they don't have to be a number, and they certainly should not be left out in the street. And that's the outrage. I wish more people shared my outrage. And why, I don't know. Why do they throw these kids out like myself? Because they do. Because that once they're done with them, they're on to the next thing. A lot of people say, well, why didn't you say something sooner? You know, it's amazing. Most people, they blindly accept abuse. They don't think it twice. They don't look at it. They think that this is normal behavior. It's been normalized conditioning like we've talked about earlier. Okay? If you really get to know somebody, you'd find out there was a lot of things that we couldn't discuss openly. A lot of people said, well, why didn't you talk about it? Because we couldn't. Okay? For the safety factor, a lot of reasons. Okay? I don't know. I wish it never happened to begin with. But now that we're here, we're not turning around. We're not going to apologize to those abusers because they got caught either. Okay? I don't have to apologize to them. They have to own their behavior. They have to accept responsibility and face the consequences of their behavior too. As Debbie Wasserman Schultz, because there's consequences for your behavior. Yeah. For an abuser, there are consequences. Exactly. It's just too bad people take the side of the bully. And I'm going to tell you right now, the days of taking the side of the monsters are over. Hello. We're taking a stand. We're not going to sit there and settle for this. That's why we're talking to representatives. We're not going to stop. They know it and they know it and we know it. We've gone on and on for hours talking to state representatives and officers. You can ask them. We're not going to settle for this. We're not going to settle for any foster parent to abuse the system. I'm not settling for that. They know exactly why they got into it. And it was mostly probably for monetary reasons. If they can give us a legitimate reason, I'd be the first one to listen. But so far, I'm not satisfied with their answers. I'm very angry that this went on this many years. I'm not going to apologize to these people because I realize, and I look at the real numbers and statistics, numbers don't lie. So I hope they can change their mind or change their ways right away. Please support and sponsor this, because I tell you, we're going to make a difference. With or without the money and the funds, we're going to still make a difference. But it definitely helps when we have the financial, I mean, we have the tools to do it. It means getting to certain appointments. It sometimes get just wherever. I can't account for everything that we've had to do already, and we've done it on zero budget. But I look at it this way: we're not going to just settle for this. We can't. There's too many people out in the street right now that need us. We need to answer the call. I don't know why people don't take up this mission. Right now, if you go around to some of the strip clubs, you can almost find any sort of problem associated with this topic at your strip clubs, in the neighborhoods, in the urban neighborhoods, in the rural area. I mean, you pick your area. I bet you'll find out more and more. You just go down and talk to the waitresses. Even they know. It's amazing what you can find out from people. They're the eyes and ears of the community. And they know. I don't know why people aren't more outspoken. I don't know why people don't take a stand. I really wish it was like that. But we are. And we will be at that protest June 11th for Pizzagate, Pedogate. We're putting a stop to it because finally, it's getting enough attention that now you can't shut these people up. And thank God for that. So I hope you draw more attention, support the protests, be there, support these kids, support the families and the loved ones that have suffered or survived the secondary victims, because there's so much more. Obviously, we know there's more layers to this story. But back to the topic as we wrap it up here. I want to tell you, recovery is the key to this, and commit it. You got to commit yourself every day. I'm going to do the best I can. You can't do everything perfect, that's fine. No one should require perfection here. You know what I mean? One day at a time. God bless you.